Hey there, gamers, and welcome to another edition of Weapon Select. Today we're gonna get all Bob Ross on it with the brushes. There are only 3 in the game right now, and while there are technically 2 different main weapons, I would say that they have a lot more similarities than differences. We'll talk about what those are, but we'll start off by just talking about the basic ink brush and about the brush class in general. So, brushes have a number of really weird differences between them and other weapons. First of all, the way that they aim, you will see a different reticle here than you see on most other weapons, especially shooters. Brushes have a really wide, random pattern of putting ink out, especially for combat. So I'll go one swing at a time so that I can show you kind of how this is landing. So you can see that when you swing one way, you're going to get ink largely on that one side. You can see it's mostly leaning towards the left. And it is only when you get the swing to the right that more stuff goes to the right. Now, there's usually a patch of ink that goes in the middle, but it is actually directional. And so to get a lot of ink output in front of you, you ideally want to be mashing and going back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth over and over again. And then you can see it paints this really wide arc around you. And in terms of combat range, it does not go very far at all. To really be sure that you're landing everything with the ink brush, you want to be pretty darn close to them. Like, this is worse than, like, Dapple Dooley's range, I believe, for consistent damage. Like, let me just double check that real quick. Yeah, like, the Dapples are already hitting from back here. The ink brush is a melee weapon in, like, a truer sense of the word than most weapons in this game are. You really need to be super close to them. So, that's one significant weirdness of it, that it's going to hit in a really wide arc in front of it. Like, this is still hitting people pretty quickly, even though I'm clearly, like, way off. But I need to be right on top of them for it to work like that. So that makes this weapon very consistent when it gets up close. It makes it so that you don't have to have the pinpoint accuracy that you have with a lot of weapons. Like, if I'm up here with, say, even something less accurate like a sploosh, and I'm aiming this far off, I'm not going to hit him. But if I'm aiming with an ink brush, this is fine. I'm hitting them at about the same rate that I normally would. So it has a similar kind of advantage as the Tri-Slosher, that it's very, very consistent at short range. You can be pretty much basically missing them and still get your shots just as quickly as you would normally, which makes it so that it's a great ambush weapon, because if somebody didn't know you were here, you're going to get those shots before they are. Like, they have to snap to you so quickly and aim so precisely, and you don't have to aim that precisely at all. You could be, like, way over here and still whacking them with it. So, very, very consistent, but you have to have the fight set up for you before you do it, and that's the hard part, which is the same exact story with the Tri-Slosher. The Tri-Slosher's biggest concern is that, yes, it's going to win the fight if it gets close enough, but how does it get close enough? And the ink brush has that problem as well. Which brings us to the question of mobility. This weapon moves differently than any other weapon in the game. This class, anyway. The Octobrush is still a little bit different, but not different mechanically. So, first of all, when you're just repeatedly mashing the ZR button like that, you're one of the slowest strafers in the game. Like, look at how little I'm moving as I'm holding straight forward on the joystick right now. This is the fastest that you can go. And if you end up against something like a shooter and you don't quite get into range yet, they are going to back away a lot faster than you're going to move forward. And so if all you do is just try to approach them like this, they're going to outpace you, and you're going to stay out of range, and they're going to be able to hit you while you can't hit them. So that's a problem. So you don't ever want to have to rely on moving forward to get your shots in range of somebody. That's just never the situation you want to be in. You want to already be close enough to them, jump out, delete them, and then move on to the next target and get going. You got to keep moving through the ink to make that whole thing work. The other option that you have for movement that no weapon does have, though, is to roll with the brush down. The rollers are able to do this, but it doesn't have anywhere near the same effect that a brush does. A roller is probably going to put the roller down and actually roll with it if they need to paint their feet, but then they're probably going to actually want to move again, because this is just kind of slow. Like, look at how long it takes me to go over here, and now compare how quickly I can move if I just swim. This is with Ninja Squid, too. This isn't as fast as this could be. So rolling is slow, but rolling with the brush is really not slow. Being able to run this quickly through enemy ink is a massive advantage. I don't have to have anything painted in front of me. This could be enemy ink that I'm moving through, and it is only until then that I run out of ink. So if you ever do get into trouble if someone's painting your feet, you don't care, because you can just run all the way out. And you don't necessarily have to keep the brush down the whole way, because you are going to be a bigger target while you're doing that. You could do this to get you through to the piece of ink that you need, and then just swim the rest of the way. So this ability makes the brush one of the more annoying weapons in the game to hit, because it can just not get locked down. The big advantage of this is that with most weapons, you shoot in front of them, and that stops them from moving forward, and they have to paint again before they're going to be able to move quickly. But the brush will get to the edge of its ink, realize that it's painted, and just do this and keep going. And it'll still be able to move about as quickly as if you're swimming. It's still a little bit slower to do this, but considering how much slower you're going to be if you're just walking, or if you're trying to move through enemy ink, it's no contest. You want to be rolling with the brush instead. So how does this end up playing out? Like, what are the implications for this? The brush tends to be an ambush weapon. It tends to be a weapon that is going to try, if it's going to engage on you, to get really close to you, do lethal damage, and then get away and, like, get out of there as quickly as it can. And it's good at getting out of there. It's good at, you know, swimming through enemy ink and getting back from behind enemy lines. It also can play a skirmisher role under some specific circumstances. Let's say that it's made it behind enemy lines, and its team wants to push in right now. It could go for a shark and try and pick someone, or if it's maybe spotted out and it can't get close enough to do that lethal damage, it can threaten to try and get into that position by just kind of running around, swimming, using its Ninja Squid, trying to poke with bombs, just try to, like, be as annoying as possible, because it knows that, unlike most weapons, it's very difficult to actually lock it down by painting alone. The enemy player actually needs to get in range to hit this player and accurately hit them with their main weapon to be able to stop them from being where they're at. So that gives them the ability to kind of just run around, make shots hard to hit, and stay out of range just enough that that player is engaged, that is, that player is trying to chase them or trying to take them out, but can't actually quite reach them. And so it's able to skirmish in that way, but if it gets close enough, there's always the threat that it just jumps on someone and deletes them. And notice how with all of these shots, I'm jumping and then swinging, because moving like this while strafing is way slower. And so if I can get some shots out while I'm actually moving quickly through the air, that allows me to move more than if I were to just start shooting from right here and have to move myself into range. So a lot of the time you will see brushes anytime they're going to reposition, they're going to jump out of the ink before they start attacking again. And a brush player will be able to mash faster than I will here. That is also something to talk about with the brushes. They do require you to mash, which is an unfortunate kind of physical skill test that can make this weapon a little bit less accessible to people with certain physical disabilities or people who just have problems with hand injuries. Because this is the sort of thing that can absolutely hurt someone's hand if they're not careful. If you're playing this weapon and you're really trying to get that fast kill time, you want to be doing some wrist stretches, and you want to be kind of making sure that you're not getting, you know, tingles in your wrists that are a sign of carpal tunnel. If your wrists are sore, you want to take some time and limber them up a little bit before you go in again, because this can get tiring, and if you're not used to it, or even if you are used to it, it can cause some physical problems for you. So that's something to be really careful about with these things. And the same will go for the Octobrush, even though it's a little bit slower of a fire rate. So that just about covers the mechanics of the brush. You typically, with a brush on a competitive team comp, will only want to run one of them. Two of them means that there's not enough weapons that want to directly engage. Because like we've said, you know, not only with this weapon's range, but just its limited mobility while shooting, this is a weapon that doesn't want to engage until it knows it's going to win the fight 100%. This is definitely more of either a sort of distraction, like evasion skirmisher, or a sharking flanking weapon. There's no real in between. This isn't a weapon that's going to be able to just run at the front of the enemy team and take fights and win them. It's not like a 52 gal or something like that in that regard. And so if you put too many of these on the same team, they're going to lack for range, and they're not going to provide a lot of forward pushing power. So you really only want one of these, and besides, if you're going to be playing that kind of flanking role or that distraction role, you only need one of those, because the rest of the team that's playing with the brush is going to want to push in on the other side. If you've got two of these brushes and then two other players that are trying to follow up on a flank, they're not going to know which flank to follow up on, which brush to help. And they're also going to limit the follow-up that can happen on those things, and maybe make it so your team is taking multiple fights at once, which is never optimal. So one brush is all you really ever want on a team. And from there, I think we'll start talking about the differences between the individual brushes. I would say that while, you know, the Octobrush Kit obviously has some mechanical differences, that the biggest difference between any of these brushes is their kit, more than anything else. Because the overall playstyle is largely similar. Just the Octobrush, we'll bring that out really quickly. The Octobrush has significantly more range and a significantly slower fire rate. So we'll clean this all up. So we can see that you can already consistently hit a player from this far back, which is almost double the range of the Inkbrush. It is still short range by any other measure. Like, again, this is probably about Dapple Dooley's range, where we're getting really consistent damage. But, again, it's very consistent. It's not damage you have to aim, so you're still in pretty good shape if you end up there. Now, there are a few weapons that you probably don't want to challenge in a head-on fight with this weapon. It is a little bit slower of a kill time than the Inkbrush is, especially if the Inkbrush player can mash really well. So there are definitely times where you may not want to even engage certain weapons. Like if a Dapple Doolies are able to roll, you probably just don't want to be getting in range of them too much. You want to be kind of trying to kite them or roll away from them or bomb them out or let somebody else deal with them or something. Just sometimes you're not going to be able to take every single fight. Just depending on how fast the opponents are and whether they know you're there. But you can see that the painting is still really good on this weapon. We still have that pretty much quarter circle arc, and since it's going out further, that's going to be really nice for us. And the rolling speed is a little bit slower, and the path that it paints is a little bit wider. The width of the path, not super significant. It's still not going to be your best painting option, but it's kind of nice if like a teammate wants to swim in behind you. This path is a lot wider, and it's a lot easier for them to actually do that without like accidentally clipping the side of it like you often do with the Inkbrush, like I just did there. So that's kind of nice. It's not a huge advantage of the weapon, but it's worth noting. Well, like I said, the kits are the big difference. So let's talk about those in isolation. In my personal opinion, the Inkbrush is probably the strongest kit, with the Octobrush being a close second. I think Zipcaster is a great combination with this weapon. This is like one of the best users of it because the brush is able to hit up over ledges. And it's also a weapon that wants to get right on top of you, which is something that the Zipcaster can help it do. So that combination of things lets it take full advantage of the Zipcaster. You're going to be usually behind a wall from someone, but you can hit over the top of it with the brush. And it's going to put you in those positions where you are at super close range, where something like a Stamper, it can get that melee one-shot if it's able to charge it in time, but that's not always the most consistent thing. So this is a really nice weapon to have after you've gotten in that position relative to somebody else. Both the Octobrush and the Inkbrush also have lethal bombs, which is awesome for them. Super needed, I think, for a weapon like this that's this short range, to have a longer ranged poking option that it can fall back on in the event that it's not able to close distance yet. If somebody knows where it is and it can't get in there yet, it can just do this sort of thing and sit back and throw these bombs and wait for a better opportunity. And I would say that the Inkbrush having a Splat Bomb is an especially good kit because the Splat Bomb is going to enable it to take aggressive fights in a certain way. So it can pop up from behind someone and do this sort of thing, where they have to run in a certain direction away from the bomb, and then they're there covering it with their paint with the main weapon. So if that's the kind of play that you want to go for, that is possible with this weapon, more so, I would say, than it is with the Octobrush. Now, that said, you know, if they don't know you're there, you probably just go in and use the main weapon anyway, because it's a fast and consistent splat. And you're really kind of using the bomb in the event that somebody's running away from you and you don't want that to be possible, or you're just trying to poke. But another really nice thing about this weapon is its unique ability to use the Killer Whale. With the Killer Whale, if you are moving while it's targeting, it's going to target from a different place. So from here, the first set of lasers is going to target this player straight on. If I move over here, the second set of lasers is going to target from here. And then the third set of lasers is going to target from here. And moving around someone in a semicircle like that creates a larger zone where they're being hit by it. And the brush, being able to move while standing faster than just about any other weapon, can move further while it's targeting than any other weapon can. You can see how far I got, and if I get it right where I actually get them aimed on the same target, you'll see what kind of effect that can have. So let's clear that out again. You can see that that's almost getting hit from, like, almost a 180-degree angle, like, all around it, if I really execute this carefully. So that's a powerful ability that you have access to, that you're able to make that radius around the player that's unsafe a much bigger. You have a much wider range of angles that they're being attacked from. Now, those attacks, you know, if you move in one direction, aren't as likely to get the splat, but with any weapon that has a killer whale, something that you're thinking of using it for is to kind of create a 1.5v1 in a fight. You're trying to make it so that this whale is forcing the player to move sort of in the way that another player on your team being in the fight would do. And making it so that something that wouldn't be advantageous becomes advantageous because there's this extra factor forcing them to move a certain way. And so even if you're not in the fight at all, being able to create that sort of a zone that they can't stay in is a dangerous thing to have to fight against. So I think this kit synergizes really well with the brush. It's fast, it's aggressive, it allows it to take fights, but it also allows it to poke from a distance when it can't take fights. So I think it's super versatile. Any brush player is probably going to be happy with this. But we'll talk about the other kits. Octobrush, like we said, pretty good fit with the Zipcaster, and does have a lethal bomb, which is nice. Again, like I said, I would probably prefer the Splat Bomb over the Suction Bomb, just because it's a faster exploding bomb. And this is more of a supportive sort of kit for it to have the Suction Bomb with the bigger radius and the larger explosion, the larger amount of ink painted. And I think Zipcaster, while it has a lot of potential, is currently undertuned. There's not a lot that you'd prefer to have a Zipcaster over. It has some unique utility, but that utility is definitely hampered a bit by its difficulty with surviving. So while it's unique and it gives you the ability to target an individual target in ways that other specials don't, it also has the significant weakness of being very difficult to survive with. It's sort of got that difficulty that the Inkjet had, where as long as you use it from the right place and target people correctly, it can get a lot of value, but used wrong, it immediately just gets splatted. And unlike the Inkjet, which used properly could just get a quad if you play it right, the Zipcaster, you're very unlikely to get big multi-kills. You're likely to be able to, like, maybe get down one target. Sometimes you're just going to jump back without having actually accomplished anything, without having gotten a splat, because you have so little time to work with. So there are definitely players that are trying to push this weapon, Prochara being one of the key ones. Keep watching Prochara and seeing what he's able to do on this thing, because, you know, he believes in it to an extent, and so to the extent that he believes in it, he's going to keep pushing it. But he's been playing a lot more Stamper recently for his Zipcaster. I don't know how much Octobrush he's really willing to play in the current climate, and he's definitely, you know, despite liking the weapon, switched off it in Splatoon 2 as well before. It was a much stronger weapon in Splatoon 1 because of tech that it had to get damage really quickly. The way that it used to work was that you would get a very consistent, I think it was like a two-shot capability if you aimed it really closely, because you would reliably get two of these flicks to hit the target at once. And so that ability, especially combined with damage up, made it splat a lot faster and made it a lot more potent. And that was when Chara got into it. And since then, every game he's seemed to experiment with it, kind of like look at it, try and play with it, make the best of it that he could, and eventually change off onto different weapons. So the Octobrush has always felt like kind of an upper mid-tier in comparison to the Inkbrush, which has a little bit more mobility. And in this case, has had a better kit, and in Splatoon 2, also the kit was a big factor. In Splatoon 2, you had baller spam on this weapon, and so that was something that it was used for when baller was meta. And even then, baller was just a really good fit with it because it was a survivability special that let it stay in behind the enemy lines even longer. And that, I think, brings us to the Inkbrush Nouveau, which a lot of people think is capable of playing just like the Inkbrush Nouveau did in Splatoon 2, where the idea of this thing is to get behind enemy lines, lay mines, you know, and then hammer at them when you need safety, and that's kind of the idea that people have been saying, and the problem with that is that hammer is not a survivability special at all. In fact, you are much more likely to get splatted once you pop the hammer because you popped the hammer. Let's talk about hammer for a second and explain why it's not going to do the job that a lot of people think it will. So when you pop hammer, it does block some shots. Now, it only blocks shots while the hammer is down. While the hammer is up in between swings, you can still be hit. So something like a splatling that's hitting you, even as you charge straight forward toward it, will still be able to hit you. And any kind of high fire rate weapon like that is a threat for that reason. So that's not something that you can even trust in every situation when you're right in front of someone. But anyone who's ever played against a hammer before and is able to keep their cool is just going to move sideways when the hammer starts moving toward them. And that's going to force you to stop using the hammer, to turn yourself, and then attack in another direction. And when you stop and turn, that's a very vulnerable position for you to be in. Like, I'm gonna, like, start hammering, and then I'm going to stop when I get in front of this target and turn and try and splat them as quickly as I can. And you'll see there's significant lag time. If someone's shooting at me during this time, I'm in trouble. That's how long it takes. And yes, this is... Jumping out of the ink and doing this is faster than any other option that you have with a hammer. So that's how you want to be doing it if you're going to have to do a stop turn. So if somebody knows where I am during that time and they're just shooting at me, I'm going to get splatted. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. What you're more likely to want to do with the hammer, the way that this works the best, if you're trying to go for splats with like the swinging of the hammer instead of the throwing of it, which is by far the best part of this special, is you're going to want to pop it from someplace else, swim it up, and do that jump swing. Now, here's my question if you're an Inkbrush player. If you're going to pop a hammer and then swim up and try and get them like this, why not just use the main weapon? That's what your main weapon already does. You don't need extra capability to be able to do that. Yeah, it probably splats a little bit faster, but I'm holding ZL this entire time. There was a sound effect, and there was a very clear visual cue. If anyone's watching that, they're going to know that this is coming, and they're just going to know to paint defensively and stay away from any ink I could use to shark them with. So, you're probably actually more likely to be successful if you just swim up and use the main weapon like you normally would in that situation. So, you probably don't get that much out of jump swinging with the hammer there. It's probably a little bit better if, you know, the opponents aren't looking, if their options are cut off. You know, there's definitely utility to it, I won't lie about that. But it's not that much more utility, and it's what the main weapon can already do really well for itself anyway. It's not adding anything new to the weapon. Usually with hammers, these days what a lot of people are just doing is throwing it. They're not trying to go in too much to use the hammer because of how vulnerable it is. And it's a little bit more usable now that the hitbox has been fixed a little bit, but it's still not great. It really isn't. So a lot of the time, you're just doing that. And that is your only ranged option. Because if I'm right here and an opponent is right here, that's not helping me. This is not helping me. If that's a forge, if that's a 52, they're probably about in range to hit me right now. And I'm just waving this thing at thin air. So the Inkbrush Nouveau just has way fewer options to be able to move in, to be able to hold its ground. It needs to be unseen by the enemy team to really be able to get much done other than like running around and threatening to shark like it normally does. Whereas the other brushes can throw bombs. The other brushes can farm for a special that's way more useful than the one that the Inkbrush Nouveau has. So this is, I think, by far the weakest kit for the brushes, and I don't see this getting a lot of play at all. There are definitely niches for it. There are times where it's going to be better than others to use this thing. And maybe if, like, you want some particular part of its kit, you would, you know, have your brush player consider maybe going with this. But I can't even think of that many times where I, as a teammate of a brush, would be like, hey, can we bring hammer instead? Can we bring ink mines instead of a splat bomb? I just don't see that being a thing that I want as this player's teammate. So using those things would be something that you do selfishly for the sake of, you know, maybe you being an expert hammer user and wanting to be able to use that in this particular comp. That's about the only kind of way that I would think you would want to run the Nouveau over the other options. So, those are my takes on the brushes, and now we're going to go and play some matches here on the Inkbrush. So, the build that I'm running here is not especially well tailored to it, but what I'm seeing a lot of people doing is running Not even Ninja Squid in a lot of cases. About half of the time, they're not using Ninja Squid. There's a lot more Ninja Squid on the Octobrush. But we're seeing just a lot of quick respawn on the Inkbrush. So that's generally what I'm seeing. I've got a little bit of that, but I'm also going to run Ninja Squid so that I can play the sharking playstyle and kind of show that off a little bit more effectively. Man, I almost want to stop warming up because I don't want to tire my finger out. Like, okay, it's plenty warm, it's plenty warm. Not gonna try and run 6 miles right before the big game, you know? Alright. Let's see how we can move her around. This is, unfortunately, a map with not a lot of flank routes. I think that is one thing that's making the brush a little bit weaker, just that it doesn't have as many ways that it can sneak up on anybody. But we'll see if we can get out there and do something kind of sneaky here, and at least draw attention. I'm counting on players who have seen me at this point, but I'm going to try and draw their attention away over here. And I'm playing it safe. I'm not necessarily, like, getting in and doing much, but we've got control of the zone. I don't need to do much. And I'm being a nuisance, and now I'm just going to run away. Alright, I lost track of the roller there. I tried to hard engage on them and just didn't have my aim on, so that's my bad for not being able to visually track them. I probably might have wanted to engage from a different angle there. It's just really hard to disengage from the angle that you've decided to take on this map. So we're going to wait for the rest of the team to be back in. Looks like we're about ready, and we're popping specials. So I'm going to start moving my way in. And now that I'm on the zone, I'm going to pop this, and I'm going to try and see if I can get something done. We got one, we got the zone capped, and the team is further forward. So that was a good job that we had of using specials to take space back. I'm going to paint a little bit here. Even though, you know, this isn't strictly a painting weapon, it is a weapon that can paint. It's better at painting for special than it is at painting the map because of its short range. But it does paint very thoroughly and very quickly, so if you need a special fast, you can definitely play to farm a lot of them. Nice, and we were able to get 2 with that. So you can see, like, a lot of the plays that I'm making are pop killer whale, run in, cause a commotion, and hope that we get something good out of that. And you're running a lot of quick respawn because that is obviously a very high-risk play style. It's kind of the same sort of idea with the 52 gal, where it's a very aggressive weapon in that regard. Let's see if we can get something done with this. This is a little risky, but maybe we get something. We got 1. Teammates were able to follow up. We get a trade, 2 for 2. I wasn't quite able to push the needle. I thought that was a little bit sketchy when I was going for it. Just try and get into a flank here. I don't think they saw me. Yeah, we just get that one for free. I thought they had to have seen me the first time. Why, hello there, Bloblobber. Cease your existence. Oh, darn. They got some help. But now that the map is painted our color, we can play a lot sneakier. We don't need to fight for our zone here. We can just kind of use it and abuse it here. As long as we're able to maintain zone control here, we should be able to win. I like the defensive booyah to keep them off of the zone for the rest of the game. Nice. Alright. So hopefully I was able to kind of show off at least the capabilities of the weapon. This is definitely not, you know, my main class or anything like that, so the times when you want to play that skirmish role versus the times that you want to play that sharking role might be a little bit skewed to one side or another, but I hope I've at least been able to demonstrate kind of how it can do both, depending on what the team wants it to do. Not too bad. And you can see, you know, we died more often than our teammates did, and that's, you know, partly due to me not taking fights super well, but partly also just kind of the nature of the weapon. So that's something that you would, you know, get some value out of quick respawn if you were running it for that. All right. So let's switch on to the Octobrush now. It's Inky Minaj! It's literally my favorite, favorite tag in all of Splatoon. They've been around a while, too. I don't know anything more about them except that I really like their tag. So, what I'm going to try and do here is maybe... Oh, we already have a flanker. Oops. Usually don't want multiple flanks happening, because that just weakens the center too much and makes it less likely that the flank overall is going to work. Alright, we were able to trade that. They did see the flank coming, but you can see kind of the consistency coming into play there. The Nautilus has a better kill time than me, straight up. No shot that the Nautilus, like, if it's got its aim on 100%, should be losing that. However, having its aim on 100% is not easy in that situation that I was in. I can hit up over ledges, they can't. And I was able to not aim super closely at them and still win that fight. That time I was out of range, so... That wasn't a great Zipcaster, and Zipcaster is something that I am just particularly weak at, and that I would not take a lot of pointers from watching how I play it, because I'm just not used to it. But kind of playing this role where we're being a thorn in the enemy team's side and trying to stay alive while doing so, and obviously not doing a great job with the staying alive part. Probably going to be someone down below us here. We definitely see some paint going down over there. So, I'm going to wait for an opportunity to throw some bombs, shark my way in, maybe get a Zipcaster out. That's a sneaky bomb. Notice how I'm using the Zipcaster here to clear out the left side ledge here. I thought that the Nautilus was going to be on the right-hand side and that I was getting to safety from there, so a little bit of a mispositioning from me. But you can see how the Zipcaster, you know, can in theory give you access to some angles that your team just normally can't aggress yet. That it would take significantly more pushing forward to be able to make anything out of. So now they know that they at least have to think about me coming from this side, and if they don't, I get to just kind of come up from behind them. So the T-Tech saw me coming, or probably heard me coming, probably heard me putting the brush down. That's another advantage of this weapon, that you're able to hit two people at once with it. It's something that, you know, something like a tri-slosher, it's also an advantage of that weapon, which, you know, being that consistent at close range comes from that exact mechanic, that you have a very wide hitbox, so you can hit multiple people. So, I wouldn't say that was the greatest game for me, but I hope that it's at least shown off some aspects of the weapon that you wouldn't see from an Inkbrush. And now let's see what we can do with the Inkbrush Nouveau. What I'm going to try and do with these ink mines when we get control is put them on the zone. Mining the zone is just a really useful tactic in a lot of cases because everyone's going to have to try and paint the zone at some point, right? And so putting them there not only will reveal any opponent that's trying to do so, but it will also repaint the zone over what they just put down and force them to paint it again. Ah, so now we're against Inky Minaj. They're flanking over there, so I'm just gonna try and play it a little bit safer. Unfortunately, like, in this kind of a position, I don't have much of an advantage except just trying to, like, take fights at close range. And I don't have a great way to get into range, so I think from this point forward, I'm going to be trying to flank more. And I'm marked. Yeah, I was worried they were going to attack me right away, and so I didn't go for it. But that was actually the one time that the Nautilus wasn't looking at me. Oh, okay. Well, You can see there, I mean, obviously the kill time is a little bit faster with the hammer out, so... That is an advantage of the special. Like, I'm not going to say that the hammer's useless. I'm just going to say that the hammer does less than the other specials in the game right now. Alright, good burst bombs there to keep me locked down. Nice, and we should be able to start moving in from there. Help out with this booyah. And then I'm going to try and actually drop down this way. Let's see if they pay any attention to this. Looks like I caught them off guard. Ooh, I did not think that we were going to lose that. I figured that we had a good position, so that's on me for not helping my teammate there. You'll also notice that, like, I talked about mining the zone. That requires me to be on the zone, and by the time we have the zone capped, a lot of the time I'm gonna want to be further out there. I was just about to put a mine there, hoping that it would catch some players on their way up to their plat and mark them for us. We can try that again, honestly. We've still got the whole paint trail over here. Yeah, that should be plenty annoying when they have to come back in. We're just gonna move over here this way. And there's that trick paying off for us. Unfortunately, I got marked. Well, they're gonna keep falling for it. The hammer is actually something of a crab counter. Not used from there, obviously. I did not judge the height that it was going to go up over the ledge very well. But it is something that you can try and use. You just got to be careful with the hammer. If there's an object that you're trying to attack that will do damage if you bump it, like the Rainmaker barrier or the front of a crab tank, you need to be careful not to just ram yourself into it to the point where you splat yourself. If you can do damage with the hammer, it does DPS faster than just about anything else in the game. But obviously you've got to be really careful about keeping yourself safe while you're at it. So I think that was kind of a decent illustration of how all of those weapons will work. We'll call it there for the episode here. Hope you learned something, and you know, obviously, if you are yourself a higher level brush main and you have some extra advice to add that goes past my understanding of the weapon class, happy to hear it in the comments and help some folks out with it. Because like I've been saying, this is not my main weapon class, not the one that I'm most comfortable on. This is all cobbled together from my experience of playing the game against brushes and with brushes on my team. So thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure to check out the links in the description if you'd want to see more of me or if you want to support the channel further. And we'll see you on the next one.